Welcome to the Zoe Routh Leadership Podcast, where we explore the future and what this means for your leadership. We ask the big questions. What's happening on the horizon? What does this mean for us? And most importantly, what skills do I need now for leadership of the future? It's time to explore. Let's go.
Hey there, it's Zoe, your friendly neighborhood leadership futurist. Canadian, Australian one, that is. And I have this big question. Have you ever dreamt of having a conversation with an artificial intelligence? What? Yes? Of course you have. Because how cool is that? Somebody who's got access to so much technology, so much insight, and so much wisdom that you can actually continue on rather than trying to have a conversation with Siri, which can be a little bit stilted and it runs a little bit dry, doesn't it? Well, let me introduce you to our guest today. His name is Josh Tyson. He's the co-author of Age of Invisible Machines, and he's the director of creative content at OneReach AI. And their business is about an open platform to create conversational intelligence for different businesses. What does that mean? It means that businesses can start working with AIs to replace some of the bottleneck processes and some of the customer interfaces and employee processes that are dragging the company down. And it has massive ramifications for liberating humans and creativity in organizations and also getting a return on investment eventually by freeing up these troublesome processes. So we have a long-reaching conversation, deep dive into all the tech that you've heard about maybe and are wondering how this might apply. And most importantly, what you can do now to step into the future and make it present. Let's get into it. Well, all the way from Denver, Colorado, stunning mountain country. Welcome to the show, Josh Tyson.
Hi, Zoe. Thanks for having me.
This is going to be an amazing conversation because it is all on the cutting edge of IT that's happening out there in the world, around the world of artificial intelligence, and something I'm really intrigued by. So what I'm curious about is what's the most important insight you've had on your journey to where you are now? So you're a co-author of The Age of Invisible Machines, which is a great deep dive into conversational artificial intelligence. And you've been a long time in the tech space. So, yeah, what biggest insight to date?
I think my biggest insight is that it's really important in life and I think in business and especially for people and organizations dealing with AI to be open and flexible. I think those two things are really important. Throughout my career, looking back now, I realized that being open and flexible might not have been a deliberate choice early on, but I think it's served me well because I've always sort of taken opportunities as they come and kind of rolled with different situations, rolled with the punches, as they say, I guess. And so by the time Rob and I started working on this book, I did have a lot of experience in tech and design, and I also had accrued a lot of experience outside of that realm, like in fine dining, writing about skateboarding. Yeah, just such a random assortment of things that I've done over the years. I think storytelling was always my main passion. And so being able to kind of bring that back into technology and design and help tell the story of conversational AI and hyper-automation with Rob has been really exciting. But I think arriving at that destination required me being open and flexible. And we talk about it a lot in the book, but for companies to really succeed with technology this sweeping and vast and volatile, they really need to be open and flexible. And that's a mindset thing. And it's also like kind of a technical requirement, working on platforms that allow them to pull in all the different tools the marketplace has to offer. It's not a situation where you want to be locked into any one tech provider if you're trying to leverage AI. So openness and flexibility. I'll say those two things.
All right. Openness and flexibility. So do you find in the work that you've done that that's a problem? Like people struggle to step into openness and flexibility?
I think it's difficult. And I think a lot of the organizations that are taking the journey with AI are enterprise level organizations. And I think that's a tall order. Really, the first step is kind of falling on your face with this stuff. It's such a
Sounds
personal
great.
journey. Yeah. So it really is kind of a hard sell because each organization is so unique and they have their own legacy systems and procedures and operations. And to go in and try and use AI to kind of automate a lot of that stuff is a really unique journey for each organization. So I think the easiest way to approach it is to be able to start building and experimenting right away. Like I said, you kind of got to be willing to fall on your face a little bit, but it does kind of require openness, flexibility, and a bit of fearlessness.
It also sounds like it needs deep pockets. I mean, you talked about enterprise level organizations being the ones that are embracing this. So how much time, money, and effort does it take to look at adopting AI, conversational AI into your processes?
I don't know if there's an easy answer to that. It's a long and arduous journey for a lot of organizations. I kind of started my journey in design and technology as the managing editor of UX Magazine, which is one of the world's largest experience design publications. And back then, it was sort of similar to how it is now. Everyone knew that they needed UX, but they weren't totally sure what that meant, like what UX was. And really, the hard answer was that it's a holistic process that required them kind of looking at every aspect of their organization and figuring out how to use technology to create better experiences, usually for customers, but also for employees. And now with AI, we're kind of seeing that same cycle happen again, where everyone knows they need AI, but they're not entirely sure what that means to them, to their organization. And the only thing they can really be sure about is that it's going to be a holistic process that unfortunately kind of registers as trauma. A lot of this,
Yeah.
a lot of this involves kind of looking at legacy systems and ripping some of them out and replacing them. And it's a risky thing, but it's also kind of an imminent issue. You can't really turn a blind eye to it. I think, with UX companies did that for a while, or there was kind of a thing happening where they would wait and see what their competitors did and then try and copy that maybe. But that's really going to be almost impossible, I think, in this new era of technology, because the companies that start experimenting with AI and start having successes with it, even if they're small successes at first, and those successes are built on failures, they still will be in such a better place because they'll already have started that journey towards kind of integrating technology and figuring out ways to get all the different systems inside their organization working together. So yeah, it's one of those things where you just kind of have to, it's a bit of a leap of faith, which is a hard thing to sell.
It is, especially in times of uncertainty and looming recession, as the news headlines keep saying. Are there particular industries that are ripe for this type of technology adoption?
Any industry, I think, could use AI to great advantage. There are a lot of tech-first companies in the world. There's a company, Lemonade, that we reference frequently in the book. They're an insurance company, but I think they describe themselves as a tech-first company that happens to sell insurance. And so they were able to their operations are kind of built around this technology. So in some regards, young companies, tech-first companies, have a bit of an advantage in that they can kind of they can build their systems around this technology instead of having to try and figure out ways to kind of use their existing technology and leverage it in ways that work with new technology. But really, I mean, as I kind of said, the companies that start experimenting with it first and start building on their successes across all industries are probably going to be at such an advantage. There's also a lot of great applications happening now with customer service and call center applications. We at OneReach, we kind of provide, it's like an orchestration layer is one way to describe it for companies, so that they can start automating processes and linking together some of the technology in their ecosystem. And we worked with one national retailer here in the US. They have, I think, over 1,000 locations. And to give you an idea of the speed with which some of this stuff comes together, we were able to put together a deployment for them in 10 weeks of like an MVP that rolled out. And this solution, I think, is handling like over 30 million calls per year. They've seen a 3,000% decrease in unanswered calls. They're using GPT technology, which is something that we've been using in solutions for over a year now. But what was really surprising about that rollout is I think that they were looking at it as a project that would save them money by kind of streamlining operations in their call center. And while that certainly was an outcome, they also are projecting just insane revenue. I think it's 35 million in net monthly revenues for 2023. And a lot of that is coming from their retail locations because they're learning that as these calls are being routed more effectively, phones aren't ringing as much in those retail locations, and people are actually able to interact with customers, and they're seeing a productivity boost that way. So it's interesting that this technology has like these immediate applications where you can really use it to kind of streamline a call center, but then there's also like this huge downstream advantage that's very human centric. It's this ROI that comes from people being able to interact with other people without being interrupted.
Can I just check on that I've understood what you just said there, Josh? And so a retailer company wanted to include conversational intelligence into their customer service calls. And so before this, a lot of this retail stores would get direct calls. And so the customer service people would take those calls and deal with people on the phone and then ignore the people in the store. And so this is what's happened by using AI. They've managed to divert those calls to allow the humans to deal with the humans face to face. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and I think that was sort of an unexpected benefit. I think what they were most zeroed in on was how can we streamline our call centers? You know, call centers are volatile spaces with high turnover. So I think they were looking at ways to really kind of improve operations there. And then this ancillary benefit has had a huge dollar amount emerging from it. So
yeah, that's really cool. So a couple of technical things to clear up so that all our listeners are on the same page. So first of all, the big one, conversational intelligence. What actually is that in layman's terms?
Oh, yeah. So, well, we have a whole chapter in our book talking about what it's not. I think one of the main misconceptions about it is that it's just simply kind of talking to machines and machines talking back. And ChatGPT has been interesting because it is extremely exciting the way it's able to respond to prompts with this very fluent and useful text. But to me, I think the bigger story there is that it's revealed how powerful a conversational interface can be, how much people are drawn to being able to just communicate with machines through typing, through text. So conversational AI does include speaking to machines, typing messages in written language, but it also is a little broader. It can include visual feedback like images and videos. It can include like even like haptic feedback, like a tapping on a watch.
Whoa.
The real, yeah, I think the real value of conversational AI is sort of unseen. It's ChatGPT is kind of a nice anchor point because you can sort of imagine how the next step beyond being able to kind of ask it to write a paper for you is if you could just ask it to do other things. Like if somehow it was the front end on an ecosystem that was connecting all the technology in your life, and you could ask it to write an email for you, but then you could also ask it to send that email. You could ask it to check the status of your flight. You could ask it to text the person who's picking you up wherever you're landing if the flight's going to be late. And you could do all that just through a simple chat window. You wouldn't have to open up your email. You wouldn't have to open up an app for an airline. It sort of obscures all that messy technology that exists in our lives and certainly in business. So that's kind of where the real power is. But I think that's the hardest part for businesses and individuals to grasp, because it's kind of a big concept of conversational AI becoming a portal into these ecosystems where technology is doing all these really big things.
People have a little bit of experience with that. So Siri, for example, on my iPhone can do some of that. So you can say, hey, Siri, can you send text to blah? And they can go and do it. I think what I've noticed in playing around a little bit with GPT-3, the biggest difference is the remembering of the conversation. So, and that's the whole essence of, as I understand it, between conversational intelligence. You can put in a query and then the AI will answer that. And then if you do a follow-up question, they will remember everything that they just said, which is quite different to Google. Let's say doing a Google search where you say, what are the top 3 trends in AI technology? And they'll come back with a list of links and articles and stuff like that. but they won't remember if you do another follow-up query. It's treated as a new piece of information. Is that sort of the biggest breakthrough link there, or one of the biggest breakthrough links?
Yeah, that's an excellent point. And I think it kind of connects with that idea of the broader ecosystem, where not only is it remembering previous interactions that you've had, it's also able to access any of the data that you'd granted access to. So it can provide contextual suggestions for other things you might want it to do, or it can kind of piece together the things happening throughout your day and present you with suggestions for things that you might do at any given time. Like, hey, I noticed that this happened. Do you want to email this person now to make sure that they know that X, Y, and Z might happen next?
That is just cool. It's so cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was just writing a little short story about, imagining how AI can sort of integrate in this, and an example of linking all the Internet of Things. So if you've got some wearable technology, as many of us do for sleep, so you wake up in the morning and your AI notices that your sleep tracker is showing elevated heart rate, elevated temperature, things aren't quite normal. And they said, hey, we've noticed this. Maybe you should check in with your consultant here. Would you like me to book you an appointment? And probably you need to have these particular supplements and take it easy today. What do you think?
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly the kind of powerful application that we talk about in the book, right? Where it's taking all these other pieces of data that are floating around in the world and contextualizing it and helping you make an informed decision. Yeah, it's really exciting.
It is super exciting. It's like, hurry up, everyone, get on board, get this all done.
Yeah. When you mentioned the Internet of Things, I mean, we talk about that a bit in the book too, that it's, because again, when I was in UX like 10 years ago, the Internet of Things was this huge idea and it was really exciting. But the missing piece was there was no way for all these disparate pieces of technology that were gathering data to share it or to communicate with each other. There was no broader ecosystem for them to exist in. And so that's really kind of the missing piece that's coming in now. So it really is almost like the Internet of Things, but for real this time.
Yeah, it's like the movie Her. I think that's the name of the movie. It's that came out a few years ago, where what do they call them? OAs, AOs, I can't remember. Operating systems, OSs maybe. Yeah. And it's exactly AI, who your digital assistant can be across all that stuff and make recommendations for you and can do all this stuff for you.
Yeah, that movie we talk about a lot in the book too, because it really was kind of a brilliant representation of AI, and the OS thing is key to it. It wasn't. I think Samantha was the name of his assistant, but Samantha wasn't an app. Samantha was an OS. Samantha, he installed Samantha on a desktop computer, I think, but then, very quickly Samantha was talking to him on his phone. Samantha was in his earbud. And it was kind of that we were talking earlier about how those conversations can go beyond just speaking and text. Like if Samantha wanted to show Theodore, I think his name is, a piece of information, he could pull his phone out of his pocket and there was the image, or Samantha could project it from something in his house. So yeah, we really liked the way that movie expressed conversational AI, because it kind of showed that breadth of experience that really moves across channels and uses a lot of different data.
Hey, it's Zoe. If you're enjoying these leadership insights, join us in the Amplifiers Academy. It's bite-sized leadership development through self-paced videos and exercises, templates, checklists, resources, and an online community to connect with other leaders. It's Amplifiers Academy, your gateway to better, stronger leadership. See you there. Before I move on to the next topic, I wanted to, because I know that if I'm a listener, I'd be like, okay, so I've got a business, or I'm an interested human. Let's say I've got a business. How do I get started with actually researching consulting tech company in order to create AI, come into my business and say, this is how AI could help you here? How do I actually get started with that? Just some like brass tack stuff.
Oh, well, you want to find a partner. If you're going to take a serious journey with AI, you want to find a partner that can let you create automations on an open and flexible platform, because it's really, really important. Like ChatGPT kind of has shown us, right now, GPT technology is a great front end, and it's a really good piece of kind of collecting the information that people speak or type. But there's a great probability that in another month there'll be something better, or something that would be more suitable to a specific use case to a business. So maybe they don't want to use GPT, they want to use this other thing they need the flexibility to be able to unplug one and plug in the new one. And really, we're seeing a lot of just quiet little innovations with ChatGPT where individual users are just thinking up clever ways to use it to do to automate routine things in their lives even. So I wonder if there's not going to be a lot of just kind of tools floating around in the marketplace that do specific automations really well or handle specific use cases, or can be part like tools that would be part of solutions that would meet certain business needs. So again, in those scenarios, you'd really want to be able to take your pick from kind of this breadbasket of tools that are out there in the marketplace. And I think another important thing too to consider is that sometimes it's better to really start creating your automations and implementing AI on employee-facing applications first, because you have kind of a safer, more captive, and somewhat more honest audience with your employees. So there's actually a few different ways that it can be beneficial, because you're also kind of introducing them to AI and showing them how they can use AI to automate the processes throughout their day that they don't like doing, like the mundane tasks that suck up too much time. They can be part of designing the automations that'll help free up their time so they can do more creative things. So I think treating it as something that everyone in your workforce should be involved in and know about and have like kind of a shared vision of how it'll manifest in the company is really important. But I think probably the most important thing is being able to put the whole marketplace to use. So finding a vendor that'll give you that flexibility.
Okay. So that's probably the really dumb question I'm going to come with next. So let's say I'm a CEO of a social services organization. And so my whole world is about looking after community and stuff. It is not artificial intelligence and tech. So as a newbie, naive person looking at, okay, I know that this would be advantageous to my organization. I don't know anything about the tech market space. What's like the very basic baby step into finding out who does this kind of work? Like, is it just Google? Or have you got a different suggestion?
Yeah, I mean, you could find a vendor partner. Like we frequently will work with potential clients to show them demos of ways that they could use our platform to automate specific processes that are unique to them. And again, I think like finding small things to start with is really good. So a company that's doing social services, I mean, they'd want to look for areas within their organization that are kind of ripe for automation. Find processes that are slowing things down or creating bottlenecks, and then work really closely with the people who are involved in that area and get their input and try and start designing automated solutions kind of step by step, and then setting them up, testing them, seeing where they fail, and iterating really, really quickly. That's kind of another key element. And that's another reason why you want kind of a flexible and open platform, so that you can plug and play with tools as you need, and you can also quickly identify things that aren't working in an automation that you just created and address those changes. It's kind of it's a really an accelerated cycle for, especially in terms, if you think of like waterfall software development, like it's so much faster than that. We talk about it being even more agile than agile. Like people who are familiar with agile methodologies are sometimes surprised by how quickly we're talking about in terms of like turning over iterations and building on failures and trying to move forward as quickly as possible.
So this open platform is what your company does?
Our platform is open and flexible. It allows companies or clients to pretty much survey the marketplace and pull in any tools that they need, and can support most legacy systems too. So if they have internal processes that are tied deeply to something, there are ways that they can connect that to the automations that they're able to build using code-free tools on our platform.
Yeah, that's the ticket there. Code-free tools. Thank you very much.
It really is kind of mind-blowing. It's one of those things where we have a lot of trouble getting people to believe us. So frequently they kind of have to see it in action, but it really is. It's a revolutionary moment, and I feel like we have a tool that is really well positioned to help people navigate this kind of crazy time.
Okay, so what's the website that people can go to?
That would be onereach.ai.
Okay, onereach.ai. There you go. That's your starting point, folks. Go and check it out.
AI needs. Yeah.
All right. So thank you so much for that. That was really, really helpful, because I know that there's so many opportunities out there and people don't even know where to start. So this is a starting point, which will be awesome. I want to talk about DAOs, DAOs, distributed autonomous organizations that are using the blockchain. So the other massive technological shift, I think, is the adoption of blockchain. For the person who is not really understanding what blockchain is, what is it? What is a DAO? And what's an example of a company that's using it?
Okay, well, so I'm not really an expert in blockchain, but my understanding of it is that it's like an open ledger. It's almost like you can see things that are happening within an organization, and it's immutable. You can't move it. It's open. Everyone can see it. So it provides transparency and a level of security. I have some friends here in Colorado who have a company called Odyssey, and they kind of work on a lot of these deployments. I think they have an app called, or it's not an app, it's like a platform called DAO House that lets people kind of set up DAOs and then launch them. And a big piece of that is being able to track the money that's going in and going out of the DAO. Typically, I think the DAOs that they work with are teams of people with different disciplines that come together to work on projects. A lot of times they're software centric, but they want to be able to, that group, the people in that DAO want to be able to vote on what projects they're going to take on, make decisions about how assets are allocated within the group and outside of the group, and all that can be done openly and transparently with a DAO. Hyperautomation kind of makes it more interesting because I think DAOs become more interesting when you think about the way that conversational AI and hyperautomation might look 5 or 10 years from now. I mean, it's kind of hard to know how quickly things will move, but one example we like to use is like Adobe. So if you had a conversational interface on your phone, kind of like the one we were talking about earlier, where you could just ask it to check your flight status, you could probably also ask it to make some edits to a photo that you had. Maybe you wanted to do some editing to the highlights or the shadows. And so it would pull up that photo in a little toolbar, but that toolbar wouldn't necessarily need to be from Adobe Photoshop. Maybe that toolbar comes from, like we said, maybe there's a vendor out there who makes a really good tool for editing photos in that way. And that tool you can use, for 5 cents or something for an hour, as opposed to the Adobe tool being more expensive. So you would just use that instead. But it really makes no difference to you that it was who made the tool or what it was even called, or if it was part of Adobe Photoshop. All of that kind of becomes irrelevant when you're just kind of working with the conversational interface. And so if you kind of think in that way, what does that do to Adobe as a business? Like, why does it make sense for them to bundle their tools anymore? And I feel like you can pull at that thread long enough, and then you just get kind of to the idea of like, well, what is a business? What is a brand? If people are so accustomed now to having conversational interactions with technology, and business and technology are sort of becoming the same thing, where does that leave brands? Like, what do brands become? It really kind of opens up this whole gray area. And that's where I think DAOs kind of step in a way, because, I mean, if you're someone who has a skill set that's in demand, you could work for maybe a traditionally structured business where, you can work really hard and get to a certain level, but you're still just kind of helping someone at the very top make more money and become wealthy. Or you could work for a DAO where you're working with a bunch of other peers, you're making decisions about how money is spent and like what you want to do, and you're not really having to take part in that ritual of working for other people in that way anymore.
That is just mind-blowing. And what comes to mind for me is that, coming back to the Adobe example, is that subscription services like Adobe, where you pay an annual fee for using this particular app, that's probably going to go by the wayside, especially in those creative endeavors. If we're going to leverage both that conversational platform and the blockchain, it means that, yeah, great example you gave. If I only need the app for this one particular thing, I'll go in and pay for it for that particular service and then drop it and move on. I don't need to spend $150, $600 a year to have this thing sitting, not being used for most of the time, when I could just use it for a portion. So I think that's really great, because, God, if I have to pay for another subscription for another app,
yeah,
no, thank you very much.
One with Photoshop too, you also have like a very crowded graphical user interface that's, it's innovative in certain ways, but it's trying to show you so much information. Here are all the tools. Here are all the different little subsets of these tools, And I think even a lot of power users sometimes probably have to double check what things are. But it becomes so much different if you can just ask through a chat window for something very specific that you need, and then there it shows up, and you don't have to like search through nested tabs. It just appears for you.
Thank you for that example. And with the DAOs, I want to come back a little bit to that. So that's the idea with people with skills, people with resources come together with a particular purpose in mind. And so to play with that question you had, what is a brand? What is a business? Shifting with that, it's like, well, a business and a brand could become a gathering of humans who want to make a difference on a particular topic. So let's say they want to solve water access or water quality in the Northern Territory after a flood. And so people with resources and skills can come together on the DAO saying, we can pledge all this money and we can vote on this particular project and we can execute it. And once that project is done, they can dissolve and move on. And it's all completely transparent. So you don't have to go through necessarily all the steps of setting up a business and tendering for this. It can all happen really quickly. Is that sort of your idea?
That's a fantastic idea. I love that idea. Yeah. And I think that, again, just speaks to kind of the power of sort of decentralized things, I suppose, where collections of people can swarm together on certain problems, solve them, and then, move on in their separate directions. I think there's kind of this idea too that we've been grappling with of productivity, right? Like generative AI, like ChatGPT, has kind of thrown up red flags for a lot of people. Like AI is coming from my job. What am I going to do? But I think one thing I've heard that I hope is true, feels true to me, is that AI isn't necessarily coming for your job. It's someone using AI, right? So it's people using AI are going to be kind of the next wave of creators. But there's also this idea that we feel like AI should be an ally. AI should be helping you make decisions, not making decisions for you. And I think how that ties into productivity is that as we start having more and more automations taking care of the tedious tasks that people typically do in a workday, it starts to kind of break down the idea of what work is, what it means to have a job, what it means to have a specific role. And I mean, I think it's certainly true in Western countries. I think that people often are they self-identify by what they do for work. But what if instead you could self-identify by something you're passionate about? Like maybe I'm someone who's a storyteller who I like to use my skill set to try and help as many people as I can. And when I hear about a water crisis somewhere and I see that there's a DAO that needs help with content or something that I can help with, that's part of my identity of who I am as a creative individual in the world. I don't necessarily think of myself as someone who does a specific role for a specific company.
What it means also is that if this is to be workable, is the rise of entrepreneurialism in terms of individual entrepreneurialism is going to be essential for this to actually work. So if you have individuals, let's say that example you just gave, where, I've got the skill set and a sense of purpose and values, and I want to offer that, I need to be able to present myself, to sell myself, to negotiate with the help of my conversational intelligence to do those negotiations, to position myself to actually make it profitable. So it's not like I have endless deep pockets. I need to do these things and to make a return on that. So how do I go about doing that? So it's a very different mindset and sense of value than somebody who says, I have these skills, I'm going to negotiate once with one employer and I trade my time and energy for a paycheck. It's quite different. So you do one negotiation that lasts maybe years in current forms. And could be negotiations on a number of different projects and multiple times a year. So that requires a whole bunch of different skill sets and value systems, don't you think?
It does. I mean, everything about AI seems to require us to rethink how we've been doing things and how we think of ourselves and kind of how we approach our lives as professionals, I suppose.
I think that's going to work really well for people who are well educated, and it's going to not work so well for people who are struggling just to make the basic ends meet and don't have a great education. So hopefully we can solve that problem first.
Yeah, I would hate for that to be the outcome, because I think one of the things that excites me and Rob most about this technology is that it has, like conversational AI in particular, has the ability to really democratize technology. you don't necessarily have to understand a lot about technology in order to leverage it now. I think there's important work to be done in helping people who are typically underserved by technology or don't have access to technology or don't have the resources or the training to use it to get this stuff in their hands as well. I think that's incumbent on everyone to try and help with that.
So just playing with the thought experiment a little bit, if I'm someone who doesn't have a lot of education, I can actually access ChatGPT 3, for example, right now for free, as long as I have an interface, a computer interface and a Wi-Fi connection, and ask it questions. How do I prepare for a job interview? What could be some questions I could do? What's the best approach to this? Like, you can actually use it as a mentor in some ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it can be a bit of an ally. I mean, obviously, it's not totally reliable. And so that again, would be kind of another hazard in the road, right? For someone, especially someone who's maybe not well-versed in technology, to know that they're not getting always accurate responses from something like ChatGPT. But I mean, I think that's part of the work that's happening right now is people who are trying to leverage GPT in specific ways, like domain-specific ways, are training it how to be more accurate for their use cases, and like figuring out all the different ways that you can accidentally trick it by telling it to do something that it's not intended to do. So there's so much work probably to do in that area, but still, I think there also needs to be something going on where more people are being given access to technology and being instructed on how to use it to help themselves to better their situations and use it as an ally, because that is kind of, in a way, the core promise of conversational AI, that everyone should be able to access technology just using natural language. So
yeah, fantastic.
We'll see how that pans out.
Yeah, we'll see. Yeah, I know. There's like, what if questions up there. And I think a lot of it will need leadership and guidance to stay on a positive path with this. So one of the things you mentioned in your publicity blurb was 3 examples of AI increasing accessibility. What do you mean by accessibility, and how can AI help with that?
Well, it kind of in the ways we were talking about. I mean, accessibility is sort of in many ways like job one of UX, or at least it kind of should be of UX design. As I always understood UX, the goal was to make it as frictionless as possible for as many people as possible to use technology. And so, people who have special requirements need to be met where they are, and conversational AI can be a fantastic ally in that respect. I mean, it's really easy to imagine people with vision impairments or low vision being able to just leverage technology by having conversations with it. I mean, that's a really easy one, but a strong one. We talked about haptic feedback, and I remember seeing an Apple commercial last month. The theme, I think it was called The Greatest, and it was showing a lot of different people with varying disabilities using technology to help them throughout the day. And there was a sequence where a mother, who I believe was deaf, got a haptic notification on her watch that her baby was crying. So even something that simple could be huge for someone. I've actually been reading a book called The Diving Bell and the Butterfly, which is by a French journalist. It was written years ago, but he had a massive stroke and was left with, I think, what's called locked-in syndrome, which meant he was totally aware cognitively. He was exactly as he was before the stroke, but he couldn't move any part of his body other than, I think he could blink and kind of move his eye up and down. And he, without using really much technology other than like a chalkboard with some letters on it, he was able to write this book, The Diving Bell and the Butterfly.
Oh my God.
From this state. It's not a very long book, but it's a beautiful book. It's interesting to think about ways that, because I mean, eye tracking technology has been around for a long time, but just how much more sophisticated facial recognition technology has become. What could that be like, where someone who was suffering from locked-in syndrome could be interacting with some sort of screen that was reading their facial movements and got so good at predicting certain things that they could call for assistance at a moment's notice. But again, I think a lot of the scenarios involve kind of an interface, thinking of ways that an interface can be improved so that someone with a specific need can be reached. But really, it kind of goes back to that core strength of conversational AI, where it's kind of the front end on an ecosystem where all sorts of technologies and data stores are being sequenced and orchestrated to create all these high-level automations so that, anyone, no matter what their needs, could really just converse with a computer in some way or converse with a machine in some way and access this huge problem solving matrix. So, I mean, it feels like limitless in terms of ways that we could help all sorts of people do all sorts of things.
Oh, that's so exciting. Makes me want to cry. So thank you for sharing that. I
course.
love the book recommendation is also really cool. So I want to talk about the leadership implications now of conversational intelligence. Where do leaders need to change their focus, and what skills will they need?
Yeah, I mean, I think hinting or going back to what we talked about earlier, they kind of need to be willing to fall on their faces a little bit, that's the jagged pill of all this, is like really the wait and see what your competitors are doing strategy. I don't think will serve anyone well. To me, that's the riskiest game to play. That's a bigger risk than actually just being willing to kind of take that first step and fail and accept that you're going to fail. And it kind of requires organizations as a whole to think differently about what ROI means, what a successful project means, because really it's kind of a continuous process. There will be a lot of failures early on, but then you'll start building successes off the backs of those failures. And then hopefully you get to a point where there are far fewer failures than successes, but there's so much new technology floating around in the world. There are so many things that are prone to changing, and there's going to be a lot of disruption that we just won't see coming. I mean, I don't think it seems like Google really didn't see Chat GPT coming, and it kind of shook their world up quite a bit. And so you have to also kind of imagine that there's going to be moments like that across industries, and then in the broader technology industry that are going to create all sorts of kind of seismic moments that you have to respond to. And so then I guess we go back to being open and flexible. So if you have a technology partner who allows you to kind of pull in all the different tools that are out in the world and the flexibility kind of plug and play, you're in a lot better position to kind of respond to those changes quickly and effectively. The companies that wait to start implementing AI are probably going to be facing a pretty steep road that I don't know that they'd be able to catch up to any competitors who have embraced it. So that's the hardest part, right? It's like clearly this is happening. It's unavoidable, and really the only way to greet it is to run towards it, scary as it may be. And just because you decide to take the I'll fail, I'll try this approach, that doesn't guarantee success, of course, but it does put you in such a better position to respond to an increasingly volatile world.
Yeah. I think that's a really good, sort of call to arms, if you like, saying don't be left behind. Because unlike other things, like for example, other technology, Zoom, kind of ubiquitous, can plug into any organization. Conversational AI is not that, as you mentioned, because it's going to be bespoke to every organization, which is its own organism. So it's going to have to be designed in conjunction with the infrastructure that already exists there, or built from the ground up with a new enterprise. And so it's going to be a new creative experience. Do you anticipate a ubiquitous conversational AI in the future that could adapt easily, or are we nowhere near close to that?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm not sure. I'm scared to think about that. And who would own it and where that voice is coming from. Yeah, that's really interesting to think about how that might pan out. But I mean, I think what's just really important for companies now is to be willing to take that risk, but also to not overlook the advantages of working internally, of starting with your own team and figuring out ways that you can work with the people on your team to automate things for them. Because not only does that help you get your feet wet and you get used to building automations, you're also creating automations that are improving the lives of the people on your team. And they're also having that added benefit of understanding AI's role as more of an ally and not a threat. Like they're seeing ways that, I understand how this automation was built. I helped make it. If I want to improve it, I can either open it up myself because it's code free and move some things around, or I can talk to someone who's on my team who knows how to do that better than I can. But I feel connected to this presence of AI in my organization, and I'm not like feeling as threatened by it anymore. I'm seeing it as an ally. And I think too, there are of course certain jobs that will kind of cease to exist because machines will be able to do them better. I think by and large, those jobs tend to be jobs that people don't particularly enjoy.
Can you give me an example of that, Josh?
Well, I mean, like if you think about like call center automations, there are a lot of like the low level jobs in a call center. I worked in a call center once. It was horrible. Like it was not fun at all. But there could be a lot of bots manning most of a call center, but they're still going to need some people working in there who understand the bots, who can be there to step in when the bots aren't delivering, who can be involved in evolving the automations and play a really active role in the maturation of the technology. So, I mean, to me, that is an exciting role within a call center and not one where you dread going to work every day. If you got to go to work and know that you got to work with technology and help improve experiences for your fellow employees and also for customers, to me, that sounds like a more satisfying role than kind of the typical grind of a call center experience.
Yeah, thank you. And that's certainly been my experience just dabbling around the edges with different AI tools like Midjourney, for example, the text-to-image AI, is that it's brilliant. You put in something and you get an image back in 30 seconds. Which is unique, astonishing, beautiful, etc. The skill, though, is going to be actually the prompts and the working with the tool, because the AI doesn't sit there and at the moment doesn't automatically put in different ideas together to generate new images. It needs input in order to generate the thing. So it's definitely a partnership piece. And I can see that there is a huge career for creatives in particular to master these tools so that you get finer and finer results that are faster. Because, it's a time suck for me who's a novice to get in there. I would prefer to have a creative do the work on my behalf and with these broad parameters, and they can work with the tool and produce it more quickly. So I think, as you said, like the future is not AIs replacing creatives. The future is in creatives using AI to uplift their commerciality and competitiveness, and to make even more amazing things, which is very cool.
Yeah, I don't think we're in imminent danger of AI being able to spontaneously create artwork on its own. I think for a while it's going to need our input. But people are going to be the ones coming up with the ideas. AI is there to help bring them to life.
Yeah, it's sort of like the internet now. The internet has everything, but it doesn't produce anything. It's kind of a massive resource. It needs input to produce an output.
Exactly.
So once we have AIs producing inputs to create outputs, then we have a self-awareness piece happening.
Yeah. Hopefully everyone will just be living on the beach by then. And everything's just being run out of sight. But yeah, I mean, we've talked about all these like positive outcomes, and I do think that there is a lot of potential for some amazing positive changes on the horizon. But it will require a lot of people stepping up to make hard decisions, both at an organizational level and just at a societal level. I mean, I think ChatGPT has also shown us how quickly something can come along and upend everything, or upend a lot of things anyway. And I think we're moving into an era where there's going to be a lot more of that happening, and time is really fleeting right now. We talked about companies needing to act fast in order to kind of cash in on this, but also just in order to set the responsible trajectory for all of us. There are things that we all probably need to be doing right now, or at least paying close attention to. Absolutely.
Where can people find out more about you? So please repeat your website address. People can go check that out. And also the book, Age of Invisible Machines, and your podcast that you run.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So I'm the director of creative content at onereach.ai, and that's our email address, just onereach.ai. If you go to onereach.ai/invisible machines, that's actually where the book page is hosted as well. But the book is available at booksellers nationwide. And then, I also produce a podcast called 9000. We've kind of changed the name over time, but it is sort of a comedy podcast from the future. I produce it with a friend who's worked in the natural product space for many years. And so it's kind of about food and futurism and technology, and then just us also teasing each other and having fun. And that's at N9K, I think is the easiest way to find it.
N9K podcast.
Yeah, in your favorite podcast app.
Beautiful. I will check that out. Thank you, Josh. This has been so good. I'm really excited to hear about all the innovations that are happening and some practical things that people can do. And the future abundance that will be created and the liberations that will happen with this technology as well. So thank you for all the work that you're doing on it and for also coming on the show and sharing it.
Oh, it was a pleasure, Zoe. I appreciate the invitation. And yeah, it's an exciting time to be alive.
That was such a cool conversation. I so enjoyed it, doing the thought experiments about what if and where could this take us. And hopefully you're sitting in your chair going, oh my goodness, there is so much cool stuff happening out there. Just take a tiny baby step. That was my recommendation. Just go onto onereach.ai as a starting point and have a look and see what's on offer there. The other thing you could do is get onto ChatGPT-3 and have a conversation with an AI and just see what comes back. Experiment with it. A couple things I did with done with ChatGPT-3 is ask questions in preparation for my event, The Future of Leadership, which I ran in February of this year. And in preparation, I was like, oh, I'll use this as a research tool. And I said, what is the future of leadership? I put that in there and got some interesting information back. And I put in there also, what kind of skills do we need for the future of leadership? And so it helped me expand my ideas, if you like. I also used it in writing Terra Blanca. I said, write a scene based on this, and the character's doing this. And so it came back and actually did a creative output. So not just research-based, but creative output. And I looked at that, and I could use bits of that and work on bits of that to put into the novel, which is a really cool experience. You can use it for outlines for projects. You can use it for outlines for articles. You can use it to write articles. It needs some finessing. It's not going to be beautiful language off the bat, but there is a lot of opportunity there. So I think go and play with that is my next recommendation. So the future is here. It's just not distributed evenly, said I think it was William Gibson. And the future is here. Play with it is my suggestion to you. In the meantime, live well, lead well.
You've been listening to the Zoe Routh Leadership Podcast. To find out more about leadership of the future or to contact Zoe, go to zoerouth.com.